Hello. So I thought I would do a little story time. I have this pretty awesome book called Rejected Princesses by Jason Porath, and it is tales of history's boldest heroines, hellions, and heretics. So this is my first ASMR video, and it could be my last, but I have been listening to a lot of ASMR for the last 2 months and have found it to be really helpful in helping me just kind of let go and focus on less stressful things that weigh me down through the day. So I thought maybe I would do one as well, in case anybody out there wants to give it a shot. It's just me story reading, and I'm going to specifically focus on a couple of stories from this book that feature women of color, and we're just going to learn some new stories and hopefully relax, and if you fall asleep to this, even better. We all want a good night's night of sleep. Words are hard. All right, so I have a matchbox, and I thought I would light a candle that could burn for those whose lives have been unjustly lost over the years. I also really like fire. So let's get started. Rejected Princesses. So our first tale is about a woman named Moremi Ajasoro. And I do want to say I have looked up how to pronounce some of these words, but sometimes the internet is wrong. So if I do mispronounce a word, I apologize. And if you know the correct pronunciation, please feel more than willing to correct me in the comments. Moremi is from 12th century Nigeria. She is known as the Spy Queen of the Yoruba. The kingdom of Ife had a problem. Prosperous and green, its full storehouses had rapidly become the envy of its neighbors, the Igbo. There's a note here. These Igbo seemingly have no connection to the modern-day Igbo people of Africa. Some sources spell the modern-day tribe's name as Ugbo, with a U instead of an I. So the Ugbo hatched a plan to steal from the Ife. Unable to take on their neighbors by force, the Igbo instead dressed up as Egungun, messengers from the dead. Now, you may be saying to yourself, oh, come on, who would actually fall for that sort of thing? Well, imagine otherworldly heaps of cloth and color with no discernible head, limbs, or human form. Look up pictures if you have the time. This book will still be here. Now picture hundreds of those running out of the forest at night, screaming and hitting people with sticks. It's little surprise the Ife ran for the hills when the Egungun raided them. After months and months of this, an Ife princess named Moremi Ajasoro began to ask questions. Why do they need food if they're spirits? Where do they go? Although it was utter heresy to confront the spirits, especially for a woman, Moremi insisted on staying put during the next raid. True to form, the Igbo came again, and the Ife all ran away, save Moremi. The Igbo, impressed by her bravery and beauty, brought her back to their city, where she was married to their king. There she learned that they were just men in costumes made of tree fiber. She played the dutiful wife for many months, learning the Igbo ways. Finally, feeling that she had learned enough, she got the king drunk on palm wine and escaped. The journey back to Ife was long and fraught with peril. She spent the nights up in trees trying to avoid wild animals. After many days on foot, she made her way back, where she was reunited with her true husband, Oranmian. And they devised a plan. When the Igbo came on their next raid, the Ife greeted them with torches, setting their very flammable costumes on fire. The Igbo were utterly unprepared and ran back into the forest. They never returned. The story does end on a bittersweet note, however. Prior to initially confronting the Igbo, Moremi had asked the river god Esimirin for his favor to stop the raids. Once she and her tribe had driven off the Igbo for good, she proceeded to sacrifice all manner of animals to Esimirin, but nothing would satisfy the river god, save Moremi's son. So she dutifully offered him to Esimirin. However, instead of drowning in the river, the boy miraculously stood up, just as a great glowing vine rose up to the sky. He climbed up it and disappeared into the sky, now under the protection of the sky god, Oloran. Was Moremi real? The story of Moremi comes from the Yoruba oral tradition, and many of its figures, notably Moremi's husband, Oranmiyan, are demonstrably real historical figures from around the 12th century, while certain aspects, notably the parts about the river god, are of course suspect. The base of the story is probably true. Oranmiyan was well regarded as a successful king, having conquered much land to expand Ife territory. It's likely that the Igbo people of the story were previous occupants, driven to the margins by an invading people. In some versions of this story, the Igbo king Abalufon II is actually the rightful heir to Ife. In this version, he's been driven out by the warlord Oranmiyan, and at the end of the story, Moremi uses her political sway to get him back on the throne, marrying him in the process. This then ushers in a new era of peace. Regardless, Moremi's story is widely celebrated to this day. Many schools and institutions bear her name, and the annual Edi Festival commemorates her story with a month-long feast. As a side note, the Yoruba fell on hard times in the 1800s after a series of wars devastated their population and slavery scattered them across the globe. One of their main opponents in all of this, the Kingdom of Dahomey, which you can read about in this book in the entry on Aguntami, or perhaps it's Agantime. I am not sure 100%. And there is the story of Moremi Ajasoro. Our next story is about a woman they call Stagecoach Mary Fields. She lived from 1832 to 1914 in the United States. She is known as the baddest postal worker in the Wild West. Stagecoach Mary Fields was not everyone's first choice for a babysitter. At 6'2" and in her 50s, Mary Fields was famous across Montana for many things. Smoking cigars, getting into bar brawls, fighting off wolves to deliver the mail, habitually packing a pistol under her apron, and having a specially granted legal exemption allowing her to drink in saloons. But raising kids? Not so much. Which is really quite unfair. She loved children, and they loved her back, even before she started offering her services as a babysitter for $1.50 a day. She had a long history of working with children. Both in her early life as a slave and her post-emancipation life as a free woman, she worked with nuns, helping with household chores and looking after little ones. Whenever she celebrated her birthday, twice a year since she didn't know the date, the town of Cascade, Montana would shut down the schools so she could treat the local kids to a party. But to many adults, and even some children, Mary was no more than her roughest edges. Echoing the more pointed public sentiment on her, one child wrote in an essay that she drinks whiskey, and she swears, and she is a Republican, which makes her a low, foul creature. All of which was true, save the foul creature bit. While Mary was a warm and loving person, she also liked to get her drink on and wasn't about to take lip from anyone. For example, she worked at the local mission for over 10 years and got paid for none of it. Boo. During much of which time she served as the foreman for its construction efforts. Some construction workers didn't take well to working for a woman, so Mary quickly resolved the situation by punching the dissenters in the teeth. This rancor escalated until she was fired. According to legend, the bishop had to let her go after finding bullet holes in his laundry from one of her construction worker duels. Once she left the mission, she tried several other jobs. She tried emphasizing her kinder nature by setting up a restaurant. Unfortunately, it went under within a year because she'd serve meals to anyone, even those unable to pay. After the restaurant, she became a postal carrier, one of the first women in the nation to do so. This was an utterly terrifying job. The temperature in Montana could dip to 45 below zero, and snowstorms would force Mary to leave her coach stranded in the snow, heft the mail bags over her shoulder, and walk upwards of 10 miles to town. On one occasion, a blizzard overtook her, and she had to walk back and forth all night to keep from freezing to death. On another, she was attacked by a pack of wolves, and her vehicle was knocked over. So she stayed up all night, fighting them off. But she never missed a delivery in her 8 years on the job. And this was while she was in her 60s, mind you. In her 70s, Mary's life quieted down some, but not much, when she retired from postal work and started a laundromat. Still essentially kind, she spent much of her time growing bouquets of flowers for the Cascade baseball team, giving them to players who made home runs. But she'd also slug anyone who had a bad word to say about the hometown team. When a laundromat customer neglected to pay his $2 bill, she, by now a senior citizen, knocked him flat with one punch and declared his laundry bill paid. Years after her death, Mary Fields was eulogized by fellow Montana resident Gary Cooper, one of the biggest movie stars of the time, with a glowing biography reprinted across a number of magazines. In it, he described her quite accurately as one of the freest souls to ever draw a breath. Or .38. I might have said that wrong, but it's a gun. I know that. Art notes. Mary's regular uniform, as depicted here, was all men's clothing, save an apron and a skirt. In the background, you can see a heap of dead wolves around a knocked-over stagecoach, as well as the laundromat customer flat on his butt. That's my AC turning on. I hope it doesn't really interfere or become too obnoxious. The chicken is a callback to her time with the nuns. During that period, she was in charge of 400 chickens. One day, she found that a skunk had killed 62 of her brood, so she in turn killed it with a hoe and carried it to the mission a mile away. When the bishop asked, "Did the skunk spray you?" Mary replied, "Oh no, Father. I attacked and killed him from the front, not the rear." And there we have Stagecoach Mary Fields.